Welcome back. This is Sandy with Sandy's Organized Chaos, and today we're going to be doing this really fun and whimsical bubbly drip mermaid tumbler. As always, you'll be able to find everything that I used today down in the description box below if you would like to shop those items. So let's wake up, prep these tumblers, and slay all day. Let's do this. Now for my base today, I am just using a 20-ounce skinny tumbler. I went ahead and I prepped it and I primed it this white color. I painted it white because my glitter that I'm using is going to be white. Now I am going to be using the epoxy method to apply my glitter, and the glitter that I'm using isn't quite a chunky, but it's not quite a fine, but I'm going to treat it like it's a fine, and I'm only going to apply a very, very thin layer of epoxy onto my tumbler like you would with a fine glitter. I'm pretty much just doing maybe like 1 ml of epoxy. That's all you want to use. You just want to make sure that you stretch it all over the place so that way there's no spaces where there's not any epoxy. So for the glitter that I'm using today, this is called White Diamond, and you can find that at my glitter shop, socglitters.com. But I'm just going to go ahead and load this tumbler up completely top to bottom with this glitter. I'm going to set it off to the side and let that cure probably for about 5 to 6 hours. I didn't use my fast set for this because I'm using a white glitter. I didn't want to chance anything, so I wanted to make sure I used my plus epoxy for this. So now that it is nice and cured, it is ready to have a layer of epoxy over top of our raw glitter. And just like every layer that I do when I go to apply epoxy over raw glitter, I'm going to hit it up really good with my semi-gloss. It just really helps that epoxy be able to adhere to something, and it will help prevent those fish eyes that can occur. Now earlier you heard me talk about Plus. Now I like to use Alumilite's amazing Plus line and Clear Cast line and their Speed epoxy as well. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Plus. It has those UV inhibitors in there, especially because we're using a white glitter. It'll help prevent it from yellowing over time. Now, the amount of epoxy I'm going to be using over my raw glitter, this was a 20 ounce. So I'm probably going to be doing about 20 to 25, if not 30 ounces or mLs of epoxy over top of that raw glitter. I'm going to let that cure again overnight, and then it's ready to have another coat of epoxy put over top of this because it was still a little bit lumpy. So now I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to sand down that rim really well, sand down any points that are sticking out a lot. Now this does have opals in it, so it's okay to kind of sand it down, but if you're using a metallic or anything like that, you definitely want to go ahead and just move straight on to another coat of epoxy so you don't damage your metallic glitter. So after I'm done sanding, I'm going to apply another coat of epoxy over top of this so that way we have an extremely smooth surface for what we're about to do next. Again, I will let that cure the proper amount of time. I let it just go overnight just so that way I know I don't have any type of sticky tumbler that I'm working with. I want to make sure that everything is nice and cured for this next part. All right, it is the next day. My tumbler is completely smooth top to bottom and ready to go. Now I chose these Mermaid Decal and some Mermaid scales as well, and I'm just going to place those randomly all over my tumbler. I am using a semi-permanent vinyl just so that way I know when I go to peel these back, because we're doing a peekaboo, so that way I know when I go to peel these back, it'll be very easy to peel them back. Now, as you see in the mermaid, I kind of put down towards the bottom because, like I said, we're going to be doing drips, so I'm just trying to keep that in mind. And like I said, this was just very sporadic. I'm just going to be doing a very light power wash over this to be able to create this peekaboo. So it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. You just want little hints of the mermaid scale and the mermaid underneath of our drips. All right, now that we have our decals applied, we're going to go ahead and move outside for the next part. Now I wanted to keep this very light and airy, so I chose this candy pink. I just wanted to keep it very, almost like pastel colors is what I was going for. I have my Dawn Power Wash. I have my spray paint there. I already shook my spray paint up really well. Made sure that it's going to spray the way it should spray. I also have my hose down there, but if you guys you can't go outside because it's too cold, you could obviously use a bucket to dunk your tumbler down into after you spray paint to clean off the soap and everything like that. Or you can use a sink if you have a laundry sink, you can do it that way as well. So like I said, if you can't go outside and get to the hose, just use a bucket or a sink. It'll be all good. All right, so now with my Dawn Powerwash, I'm just gonna go right around my decals here. Again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's okay if it kind of gets up on it as well. It's okay, it's gonna add to the look that we're kind of going for here. So again, I just took that Dawn Powerwash, went right around my decals, spray it one more time just to make sure, and then I'm just gonna very lightly spray over top of my decals here. And then once I get it all spray painted, I'm gonna go ahead and pick up my hose and rinse it off. Now, after I rinsed it off, I decided I wanted to come back through and add just a little bit more of the pink to it. So you're going to see me pick up my Dawn Power Wash and just completely spray the whole thing, spray all the Power Wash all over the tumbler, and then give it just another light coating of my pink as well, just to kind of give it just a little bit more of that bubbly look that I was going for. But you could obviously take a second color and do this as well. A lavender would have looked really pretty with it, or something along those lines, just to kind of give it a little bit more contrast. I'm going to let that dry, and then we're going to take it inside and peel back those decals. But before I peel back those decals, I'm going to take some rubbing alcohol, and I'm going to also take a paper towel, and I'm going to wipe away any kind of mist or overspray that might have got in between my white areas that I just don't want there, because if you don't wipe those off, it'll kind of make it look milky, and I wanted it more pronounced. So this is just me kind of cleaning it up and making sure that it is ready for peeling back its decals. All right, now that it's all cleaned up, now's the fun part. You're just gonna take your little tweezers or your fingernails or whatever you like to use and peel back all those little decals, exposing your peekaboo. Now, after I got all my little decals peeled back here, I decided I was going to go ahead and apply my decal right over top of this. So what I'm going to do is, after I get this all peeled back, I am going to spray it again with my 2x Ultra Clear, just so that way I know my surface is smooth for my decal to be able to stick to, because this was a glossy paint that I used. So I'm going to go ahead and spray that down with my 2x Ultra Spray, and I'm going to go ahead and apply the decal that I would like onto this tumbler. And of course, again, I'm going to let you guys know that anything that I use, I'm going to put down in the description box where I got my decal, where I got the mermaid, the scales, all that, just so that way you guys can shop those items if you would like to. Now, after I got my decal applied, I just used a basic black vinyl for this. After I got my decal applied, I realized I'm missing 2 dots on the just and like there. So I'm going to go ahead and peel back my transfer tape, and I'm actually just going to take a Sharpie marker and just put little dots there to fill in where I accidentally forgot my dots there. But nobody's going to know. These things happen, and because it's just a basic black vinyl, it's okay to go in there and do that. See, you can't even tell, just like that. There we go. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and put a coat of epoxy over top of this. Now, if it needs to, apply another coat of epoxy after this is cured, if need be, because this is going to be our finishing tumbler. Our drips, I'm not going to be putting a coat of epoxy over top of the drips, so you want to make sure that your base is fully done. So if it needs 2 coats of epoxy to make sure that your decal is nice and smooth on there, make sure you go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go ahead and get these coats of epoxy put on, let that cure, and then we're going to move on to our drips. All right, it is nice and cured. My base is completely smooth and ready to have these finishing drips applied. I really love that sparkle. Look at that, so pretty. And I love how that peekaboo turned out too, and I hope you guys enjoy that as well. Okay, so for my drips, I'm using a bit more than you typically would. I did 1 pump each of my A and B, so that's 2 ounces altogether of epoxy. You don't need that much, but I wanted my drips to be very dramatic. If you don't want your drips to be as dramatic, because I kind of let mine flow down the back a bit more than usual, then you're just going to need about 30 to 40 mLs of epoxy. That's about it. So you don't need this much epoxy, but that's what I wanted to do, so that's what I'm showing you guys. Now, right into my epoxy, you see I'm adding a little bit of white acrylic paint. You just want to do a little bit at a time anytime you're adding any type of coloring, so that way you don't accidentally add too much. So just do a little bit at a time until it gets to that color that you would like. As you can see, it's still a little bit see-through, and that's exactly what I want. I didn't want it completely saturated with that white color, as you see there. So that's the look that I'm going for here. Now this next part is completely optional. I'm going to be adding this Periwinkle Glow. This is a mica powder by Arteza, and it just really gives it a little bit of just an aura. That's the only way I can explain it. After it's all cured, it has like a bit of an opal aura glow to it afterwards. Again, completely optional if you don't want to add the opal mica powder. Completely up to you, but that's how I'm doing mine so far today. All right, I got that all stirred up, and I want to show you guys the little bubbles that I'm going to be adding to the epoxy. Now, these are UV resin bubbles, so they are non-toxic. I made sure of that because, again, we're not going to be putting a coat of epoxy over top of this. You want to make sure that anything you use is going to be non-toxic and safe to use. They actually use these for applications in nails and stuff like that. So, again, it's just little resin balls. That's all they are. Now, I am going to be adding just a little bit into my epoxy itself. I really feel like it gives it a lot of depth once you go to apply the drips because you'll be able to kind of see those underneath the epoxy as well. And then again, after we add the drips, I'll show you what I do with them as well. So I'm just going to go ahead and stir those in. Again, I didn't add too much, just a little bit to kind of give it, again, just a little bit of extra underneath the epoxy. Now I do add one more color to it, which I'll show you guys here in a second, but I went ahead and just started putting in my cornstarch right away. So now that that's all mixed in, I'm going to go ahead and start using cornstarch. Now my cornstarch is going to be kind of like a thickener. It's going to help it kind of get thicker a little bit quicker than it would if I just kind of let it sit and do its own thing. So the cornstarch is going to make it a little bit fluffy and a little bit thicker and just give us very pretty drips. But I'm just going to add that a little bit at a time. I only added probably 2 little things of that. So it was probably about a tablespoon's worth of it into it so far. And then I actually realized here that I need to go ahead and add my other coloring into it too. So I'm going to go ahead and do that as well. Now into that, I'm going to be adding Tim Holtz Alcohol Ink and Mermaid. Now this actually has kind of a green undertone. If you guys have used this before, it kind of has like a greenish undertone. So when I applied it into my mixture here, it actually turned a beautiful seafoam green color. And I absolutely love how it turned out because it goes so well with the pastel look that I was doing. So again, I added just a very tiny amount of acrylic paint. I added a little bit of my cornstarch so far. I added the beads so far. And then you want to add 1 drop at a time until you get the color that you would like. And then there you go. Now our drip is underway here. Now I'm just going to gradually add in cornstarch here and there. I don't want to add too much. I just want to add it until I feel like it's probably enough in there, because what's going to happen is that cornstarch is going to be activated once the epoxy starts to warm up. So it's just like with cooking. When you add your cornstarch to something that is hot, it's going to thicken that up, right? So your epoxy is going to get warm and it's going to start thickening up that epoxy, so that way we can go ahead and move forward with our drips. Now I have to say, it doesn't speed it up as much, you know what I mean? It's not like instantaneous, like you can go ahead and apply your drips right away. No, you have to wait for the epoxy to start warming for the cornstarch to get activated. So it still took probably about 30 minutes, if not a little bit longer. You see, I keep scooping it off to the side. There we go. And that's about as much cornstarch as I'm going to add to it. So probably altogether, I did about 2 to 3 tablespoons worth of cornstarch into my epoxy. Again, I'm using a lot more epoxy, so that make sure you guys kind of tone it back a bit with your cornstarch whenever you go to apply it if you're not using as much epoxy. All right, now I feel like it's ready to go. So I have my tumbler ready, and I'm actually going to be taking the stick out too because it's going to get in my way. But I'm just going to go ahead and stir that up just a little bit. I'm going to smear it onto the side and kind of show you guys what that looks like. Hold on, there was something in there. Let me take that out. Okay. So let me go ahead and smear that across the side here. You see it's still pretty drippy. So once I do that, it moves slow, but it's not as slow as I want it to be. It's still kind of drippy. So I decided I'm just going to add it to the back of the tumbler first. I'm not going to do anything with the front yet. And again, I'll show you what I mean here in a second. All right, one more test just for good measure. You know, this is probably the hardest part. It's kind of a learning curve when you go to learn how to do drips and figuring out what looks good, but I really like that right there. And again, I'm going to take it, and I just want to take my stick and I'm going to scoop up a little bit onto the top of it And then I'm going to scrape the back off so that way I don't have all these little danglies going on there. And then I'm just going to take that part right there, and I'm going to start smoothing that onto the top. See, I just take my stick and just scrape it right along the top. And that really helps out with things getting on the inside and little drippies accidentally dripping on the outside of your tumbler as well. Because again, this is our last coat of epoxy over top of our main tumbler here. So if you accidentally drip something that you don't want somewhere onto the tumbler itself, you need to hurry up and get a baby wipe. See, I did it there too. You get a baby wipe, or you're going to get some rubbing alcohol and just kind of wipe it off. I decided right there, I'm going to go ahead and leave that because like I said, I want these drips to be a little bit more dramatic. So I'm just going to help it out and kind of bring it down the back a little bit. So I'm just going to keep taking my stick here and scraping it off onto the top, and I'm going to stop right around where my decal is because it's still too drippy to go around the front yet. So after I get this applied, I'm going to start doing the process of you flip it up, you flip it back over, just to make sure that nothing goes a little too far than it should be. Now, of course, as you're sitting here, the epoxy is going to continue to thicken and thicken even more as you're going. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and start applying just kind of a second layer over top of the first layer that I did. And this is just going to really help out the dramatic look, there we go, that I was looking for with the back of my tumbler here. And again, I'm just going to keep flipping that over, upside down, back upright, until it's ready to be able to get that epoxy over onto the front. All right, it's been a little bit longer now, and my epoxy is almost to the point where it's almost hard to handle, and that's kind of how you want it when you go to do the front. So now I'm just going to do the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and take my stick, pick up a little bit of it, and just smear it right across the front to be able to catch up with the other drips that we have going on around the back. And as you've seen, I just kind of layering a little bit more on as I go, because again, this is different stages of the epoxy, so it's a little bit thicker. And I went ahead and I put my stick back on too, because now I have to kind of carry it around with me until those drips really settle down. But I'm going to let this kind of set up just a little bit longer, probably another 20-30 minutes or so, and then I'm going to apply some more little beads over top of it too. All right, it's had time to kind of set up. It's still where if I put something on it, these beads will sink down into it, so that way they're nicely secured into the epoxy. But it's not going to affect my drip if I'm holding it like this. Do you know what I mean? You guys understand. I know you do. Now, my biggest thing here, all I'm doing is just taking sprinklings of my beads and just sprinkling it right into it. My biggest thing here is these things bounce all over the place. Make sure you have something under you that will catch all your bouncing beads. That was the only thing. I'm like, oh my goodness, what am I doing? So I'm just going to add these extra little beads, and I'm going to continue to let that cure. And of course, you can add as little beads or as less beads as you would like. I really wanted to give it just a very dramatic look. So as you see, I'm really adding a lot in there. So with the beads up underneath and then the beads on top, it just really gives it a very cool effect, I think. But no matter what you guys decide, I know you guys got this. But like I said, I'm going to go ahead and let that cure, and she is ready to go. Whether you take this design and duplicate it as is, or you take it and let it inspire you to create something that is completely your own, I hope that you guys had a lot of fun watching this tutorial today. Again, if you're new to my channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and I will see you guys next time.